From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's ahead. During his weekly comments on the grain market trends, K-State's Dan O'Brien says that there are a few nuggets of optimism for better grain prices out there. In particular, he notes the grain movement difficulties in South America, which could open the door for more U.S. corn and soybean export business. Following Dan, K-State's Ignacio Ciampitti, talking of a multi-university research project he's leading, looking at approaches to soybean crop management that could result in a higher protein content in the marketable product. And further ahead, with her weekly report on the Kansas agricultural weather beat, K-State's Mary Knapp, along with much more, here on Agriculture Today.
Make hand washing a healthy habit everywhere you go. Wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, especially after going to the bathroom, before, during, and after preparing food, and before eating. If soap and water aren't available, use a hand sanitizer that has at least 60% alcohol. Life is better with clean hands. A message from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
You're listening to Agriculture Today from Kansas State University. Welcome once more. Well, we're going to take the tone of accentuating the positive as we pick up on the grain markets now. Dan O'Brien standing by with us, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension from his office in Colby, Northwest Kansas. And in fact, you can find some favorable things in these markets, Dan, amidst all of the other things that aren't so enthusing. Let's start with the corn trade and wondering about how the acreage is going to pan out when all of this is said and done.
Well, there's action and reaction in the markets, and all the negative news that's come into corn has probably lowered the amount of planted acres that we're going to see in the U.S. And talked with fellow analysts, a number of folks wondering just where that will go. Of course, a lot of seed's been bought, but still on the margin, things can change around. And in some numbers that I put together, if the USDA projected just a hair under 97 million, if you take about 2.5 million off of that, you're at about 94.5 million acres. And, 2.5 million acres at about 170 bushels per acre is about 450 million bushels. And we have lower yields than that, or whatever number you want to put on there. It's not hard to get at 450 to 500 million bushels of corn reduction just off the acres that we've seen. And purposefully looking for positives. One of the best cures for low prices is low prices. So we're in position if the ethanol situation turns around and if livestock feeding holds up. And by the way, we have discussions of policy moves to where the U.S. government's taking initiatives to shore up the livestock sector, and we'll see what happens in the ethanol side. Anyway, the point is that we're in position to use a whole lot of this grain if the demand side can turn around strongly. And we have, in light of these low prices, seen export movement. The week ending April the 9th, 48 million bushels of corn exports, 50 the week before that. We've had several weeks like that. I would say in the international market, we keep looking at our main export competitors and our buyers, but Brazil has enough dry conditions accumulating down there, as does Argentina, that their corn crops are starting to show the effects of it.
And in fact, you bring up the South American competitors. It's not just weather that they're up against now. The actual flow of crops to the marketing points has been complicated, so to say, of late.
Well, yes. The dry conditions in Brazil has led to one of their main rivers, the Parana River, that they have their terminals built upon, being low enough that they're having trouble getting full ships through them. Even you see a headline yesterday about Brazil mulling the flush of one of their dams to protect one of their main export companies' exports. So that slows the system down. Have also taken in information of late from an international point of view, listening to or setting in on conferences online, of course, from people in even Asia, Australia, UK, et cetera, and listening to what their thoughts are on the logistical challenges of the COVID-19 situation. And surprising as they talk about ships being backed up in queue that can't unload, that their normal courier systems are disrupted, and that they're being forced to change over to a paperless transfer system. So to the degree that this COVID-19 situation has come in and affected their ports, how they load and unload ships, and the speed of it, well, what that does, I guess it makes me thankful that here in the U.S. that I'm sure we're affected by this too, but it's kind of a game now of efficiency. If the U.S. can maintain the efficiency of this grain logistics and handling system, then there may be prices elsewhere that are competitive, but if they can't load it on the ships and move it out, then it's advantage U.S. And maybe that advantage is enough to overcome the currency issues. So that's what's working against the U.S., and that we seem to be responding in a way that is inspiring more confidence around the world than in some of their own currencies. So that's on the good side, I guess. So you have that positive going on. I think when I look at Brazil and Argentina and others, and Paraguay elsewhere, one thing I think that we have as an advantage is our well-developed rail and barge system. We can load trains at terminals, not a lot of people involved, et cetera. And Brazil and these other places are developing that, but they still, from deep in interior, they're still relying on trucks, lots of trucks, lots of people. So the COVID-19 situation is affecting them. And Brazil, Argentina, particularly Brazil, is taking more of a herd exposure mentality to dealing with COVID-19. And, that may work for them. It may not. But in the meantime, it's sort of, there's at least risk, unfortunately, for those folks that in certain hotspots, just like in our own country, where we have tightly compacted populations, that disease, at least temporarily, could be very disruptive. So I guess I'm bringing that up. That, and one more thing to add in before I bring the final thought, you also are seeing now major countries, major wheat exporters, wheat in particular, being affected by the desire for these countries to make sure they have strong, adequate domestic stockpiles.
They're holding on to their own supplies, in other words.
Well, yeah, and if they run short, then they've got to bring in supplies from somewhere else. And other place that may have major COVID-19 problems. So in the short run, the benefit to the U.S., if we can maintain our door open, to ship grain, in the short run, it helps. In the long run, you'll have a lot of places that have higher stocks, and it's probably going to affect the grain market some. And it's a form of protectionism. So that's the downside of this. But in the short run, I guess the next several months are going to be a very interesting thing to watch, because we could have unexpected surges in demand from some of these countries that are having their own round of problems, either can't get the grain out or are worried about their domestic supplies. And then it wasn't but 6 months ago we were bemoaning the fact that the U.S., that in wheat, the U.S. was a supplier of last resort. Well, guess what? In some of these situations, we're getting down to the last resort. So we'll see where this goes in coming months.
Well, Dan, you pull all of these bits and pieces of favorable elements together. Will they be enough to supersede the other things that we have been talking about that have weighed on the markets to the point where marketing opportunities for producers may be at hand?
Well, I think the big issue that we're most worried about is with corn. So much is going to depend on the rapidity with which we can see the domestic U.S. ethanol industry, which is dependent on motor fuel consumption, move to the higher side. And you and I have talked about some of the agreements that are out there, the conflicts involving Russia and Saudi Arabia and the U.S. getting involved, helping to broker a deal. So that holds some promise, but that's just sort of stopping the bleeding. I think the bigger issue will be the efforts that are out there to come up with a reasonable way to mitigate and manage the impact of the COVID-19 coronavirus upon the U.S. economy. So, there's just an awful lot riding on everybody working together and coming up with these local disease mitigation issues, as well as looking for treatments, medicines, eventually vaccines that'll help. But Eric, I just have my one comment on this.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have a lot of dire projections, and I'm a trained ag economist, and we studied forecasting, and I just am always struck by how easy it is to forecast with the trend, but how difficult it is to figure out when there's an inflection point, when the trend is going to turn. And it's judicious and wise to be looking at this current situation as it affects agriculture and to guard yourself against what could happen if the trend continues. But it's also a lack of foresight to not anticipate how you can come out of it. So that's the challenge we have right now. People with a lot of varying views in agriculture, a lot of different perspectives on risk aversion as opposed to the opportunities we might have once we come out of this.
Be at the ready to capitalize on those as they manifest themselves.
Yes, that would be my thought on the ag side.
Yeah. Good input indeed, Dan. And of course, he does post his thorough notes on the grain markets each week on the agmanager.info website. So don't forget to have a look at those at agmanager.info. Take care out there, Dan, once more, and we'll talk again next Friday.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
That's K-State Research and Extension grain market economist Dan O'Brien. Speaking of agmanager.info, quickly here ahead of the break, if you happen to miss last night's online session out of K-State Agricultural Economics on the impacts of COVID-19 on land values in Kansas, they did capture the video of that webinar, and there's good information to take in there. That'll be posted on agmanager.info later today, so you might have a look at that as well. And Agriculture Today will be back after these moments away. This is the K-State Radio Network.
Kansas farmers and ranchers are helping feed your family in the world. The largest contributor to the Kansas economy is beef cattle. How do you get that juicy steak on your plate? In order for you to enjoy your tasty meal, it requires the hard work of the producers, marketers, advertisers, processors, inspectors, transporters, packers, and consumers. So thank all these people and sit back, relax, and enjoy your tasty meal.
Agriculture Today is back now as we tell you about a project that is now underway at Kansas State University and numerous other university partners looking at means of improving soybean seed quality, that is, the end product. And leading the charge on this 3-year study is our guest now, crop production and cropping systems specialist Ignacio Ciampitti of K-State Research and Extension. There's some excitement about this work that you and colleagues, not only here at K-State but beyond, are undertaking here, Ignacio. This is supported by the United Soybean Board, this project, correct?
Yes, the project is supported by the Soybean Board, and one of the main ideas of the project is to investigate different approaches how to increase soybean protein.
And that's the quality factor you're looking at here, protein content in soybeans. How important is that to the end user, just to set the table further here?
Well, if you think about protein by itself, or even if we go back for 1 second to the productivity factor, so in the last 20, 30 years, we have made a tremendous progress increasing soybean productivity and soybean yields. And I think that one of the consequences of really increasing that productivity is that it's impacting very slowly the protein content on soybeans. And the main end users for soybeans are looking at poultry industry, looking at swine industry, looking at livestock industry. So for many of those end users, soybean protein and quality is a large factor. And then while we are very proud of saying that we did an excellent job and farmers today are doing an excellent job on improving productivity, we want to now specifically more trying to focus on how can we maintain quality. And then I think that that's one of the main focuses of today's project is we did a good job on looking at yields in the last 30 years. And then the question now is how can we boost both yield and productivity and the quality at the same time?
So yield and protein content can coexist here, and we'll talk about the approaches you're taking here in just a second. To note, K-State's partnering with several universities, South Dakota State, Iowa State, Arkansas, Illinois, Purdue, and Minnesota, all contributing to this project. One of the ideas, Ignacio, that you're testing out here is applying nitrogen to soybeans. As everybody knows, soybeans fix their own nitrogen. But you're looking at adding supplemental in to the soybean crop, and if that would influence protein content. What's the premise behind this approach?
Well, one of the premises was, one, to investigate if soybeans were limited by nitrogen. We understand that soybeans can fix their own nitrogen, but we were trying to investigate that process implies a cost for the plant, and if it implies an extra cost, then the question is if soybeans were limited by nitrogen. So we were investigating a few studies looking at adding nitrogen to soybeans to see if we were able to offset the reductions in quality. So far, many of the studies that we have conducted, in some situations we have seen some improvement on yields, but it's very erratic. So rather than focus on fertilization, which basically economically is not advisable to apply on soybeans, we are thinking about how can we find ways so the plant can be more efficient and increase that nitrogen fixation. And that is one of the main elements that we wanted to focus now, is to find ways of boosting up and increasing nitrogen fixation.
One of those, you say, is looking at the rotations in which one grows soybeans. What other crops are included in that rotation, and striving for diversity in that rotation?
Yeah, in fact, we are thinking about how we can increase the microbial diversity, how we can improve basically that soil health. And I think that they start thinking about the system as approach, looking at crop rotations, looking at multiple diversification factors that basically will include different crops, and even in trying to understand how the main practices that we usually tend to promote for improving yields are tending to affect in the protein side, related to planting date, management like thin rate, plant density, row spacing. So we really put together like a set of different studies, one of them already published, reviewing all the different sets of management for soybeans. And then we investigate another set of studies looking at how the quality, geographically speaking, within the U.S., how quality has been formed, and then what are the places or the regions of the states that they have difference in quality. And then the last effort that we are conducting on the project is specifically start looking at inoculation practices or finding ways that we can improve that nitrogen fixation. So we understand that nitrogen is one of the factors that can help the plant to improve the quality with other nutrients like sulfur. And then we are thinking about investigating different inoculation timings to see if we can help the plant to increase that nitrogen fixation efficiency. And one of the elements also that we were conducted still is like looking at potentially very small applications of nitrogen and sulfur to see if we can really target improvements on quality alone. We already discussed that nitrogen economically is not a factor that we want to promote in terms of adding nitrogen in large quantities, since this plant can fix nitrogen. But we are investigating, specifically at different timings on this growing season, and then more intentionally going to late in the season, how much applications of combined nitrogen or sulfur can help us to increase and make an impact on protein. And the other concept that is unique on this research is we're also looking into the subcomponents on the protein, that is the different amino acids. And we're trying to investigate basically if there has been any changes on amino acids over time, and then how well any of these practices might be able to impact amino acid composition on the seeds.
As far as what a producer might do here, you talked of a couple of variables, planting dates, seed populations, and to be more specific, you're actually evaluating earlier planting dates than what would be normal and lower seed populations, again, striving for a higher protein content.
Yeah. And if you look at the possibilities, we still need to start looking at even within varieties and start trying to understand each different soybean variety is also like a potential genetic target for protein. So we need to also start looking at different potential options of combinations of practices for selecting varieties for the right environment. And I think that the focus is evolving and changing with the concept of developing these, not only the best practices for increasing yields, but what are the best practices for helping that crop to increase quality. And that's, at this point, is our main target goal for this project.
So this was designed to be a 3-year study. Where are you on this chronologically, Ignacio?
We are finishing year 2, and then we are entering, it's more than 3 years, so it's a total close to a 4-year. And then we are kind of a little bit more halfway through. And then the first year was more looking at trying to review all the main practices affecting quality, including this kind of a geographical characterization of data for different projects across the U.S. And now we are entering into, I would say, one of the most exciting part of the project that is looking at field research in multiple states on trying to understand impacts of late inoculation timings, impacts on nitrogen and sulfur application and application timings to see how much are we able to really make an impact, not only on the productivity, but specifically more on the quality side.
So work yet to be done, but by the sound of it, you feel encouraged about what you're finding so far, some potential ways of enhancing that protein content.
Yes, yeah. I think that we are very excited because I think that we have an excellent opportunity and the market will be there. And the market will be there asking us the questions of having the research ready to make sure that we can start answering and providing scientific data so we can move forward this exciting kind of a market for soybeans in the future.
Well, good progress so far on this multi-year study, and we wish you the best in continuing it on into this growing season, perhaps beyond. Ignacio, thanks for sharing the word on this work, and good luck with it moving forward.
Thanks, Eric.
Ignacio Ciampitti with us. He's a crop production cropping systems specialist with K-State Research and Extension. He's leading this study involving 6 other universities in the region and supported by a grant of $1.5 million from the United Soybean Board. They're looking at ways of boosting protein content in soybeans while still maintaining strong yields. We'll hear more about this undoubtedly in the future. And you're listening to Agriculture Today.
Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so stay a minimum of 6 feet away from others and stay home if you can. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, continuing on now with today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue told Fox Business News yesterday that the USDA expects to release its first phase of COVID-19 aid payments to agricultural producers very soon. The Secretary said the first round of aid payments would be in the range of $16 to $18 billion. Perdue said the USDA will also be buying as much as $3 billion in food products pork, dairy, fruits, and vegetables for aid programs. He told Fox Business that the aid to agriculture would also be higher by the time summer hits. The USDA received $9.5 billion in the stimulus bill last month to use immediately, another $14 billion to boost the Commodity Credit Corporation funds. That also becomes available at the end of June. In multiple broadcast interviews yesterday, the Secretary said there would be aid for commodity producers. Regarding ethanol, he talked about helping the export market, but did not talk about providing direct aid to the ethanol sector. And the Secretary said there's no shortage of food in this country. It's just taking the food system a little time to adjust to the new demand situation. More on that from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
Yes, in some grocery stores in some cities, there are slim pickings for some products, particularly meats.
But that does not mean that we don't have enough food in this country to feed the American people.
Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue at the White House Wednesday telling reporters even with some meat processing plants slowing or temporarily stopping operations, there's still plenty of production. But, of course, the ultimate destination for that food has changed suddenly.
From restaurant and institutional settings to retail settings.
Which require, among other things, different sizes and types of packaging and labeling. And Perdue says it's not as easy as you might think to totally revamp things. He compared it to an accident on a highway.
When it's flowing along well, and you have a crash at one place, it backs up, and that's what's happened in the food supply chain, but we're working through that.
By changing lanes, taking detours, resetting the GPS, and delivering the food to stores. That may take a little extra time, he says, but
we have plenty of food for all of our citizens.
Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Governors of 5 U.S. states are now asking the Trump administration to waive biofuel blending requirements on the basis that complying with the mandates pose severe economic harm to the economy. The governors submitted a series of letters to the EPA. Those governors included Greg Abbott of Texas, Gary Herbert of Utah, Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma, and Mark Gordon of Wyoming. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards made a similar request back on April the 7th, according to Reuters. The EPA now has 90 days to decide on that matter. The governors are citing a spike in the cost of renewable identification numbers, or RINs. Those are the credits that refiners can buy to demonstrate compliance with the requirements. They also cited the COVID-19 pandemic as another factor, noting that it has already forced the closure of at least one oil refinery. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee Chairman John Barrasso of Wyoming issued a statement backing those requests. And the USDA and the Department of Homeland Security will allow more flexibility now for employing H-2A workers already authorized to work other jobs in the U.S., allowing those workers to stay beyond the period allowed under current rules. Via a temporary final rule that the agencies released this week, this means that companies seeking H-2A workers can start employing certain foreign workers who are currently in H-2A status in the U.S. immediately after the United States Immigration Services received the H-2A petition. Those workers cannot be employed earlier than the start date of employment listed on the petition and must already be in the U.S. with a valid H-2A status, according to those departments. Well, as the new winter wheat crop continues to develop here in the Central Plains, it's worthwhile to step back and appreciate what hard red winter wheat brings to the milling and baking industries. Its utility and versatility is what sets it apart from other wheat classes, as we hear from Marcia Boswell on this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Marcia?
In the increasingly competitive global wheat market, it is important to review the advantages that U.S. wheat delivers to millers and bakers. Kansas wheat farmers predominantly grow the largest wheat class, hard red winter wheat. With annual average production over the last 5 years of more than 831 million bushels, U.S. hard red winter wheat accounts for more than 41% of the total wheat produced in the United States. Mills that use only one class of wheat in their grist are few and far between in the world. Blending classes or wheat from different origins is a standard and crucial for the mill and their customers. Blending adds consistent quality in mill operation and in the resulting flour products to the wheat foods processor. It helps the mill produce the most valuable flour at a lower cost, and of course blending is needed to produce the range of flour products for specific end uses. For these reasons, the quantity and quality of U.S. hard red winter wheat produced annually creates an optimal foundation for any wheat procurement strategy. From the miller's perspective, U.S. hard red winter wheat brings consistency to the grist. U.S. hard red winter wheat is available in a wide range of protein levels, which is excellent for making a variety of wheat foods alone or blended with flour from other classes to optimize performance and flour cost. It is also good for producing an all-purpose flour that can be used in a wide range of products. Medium protein flour from hard red winter can be used for several types of yeast and flatbreads and noodles. Low protein hard red winter flour can be used in a blend with soft white or soft red winter to make some types of biscuits or cookies. Higher protein hard red winter can be used for pizza crust, artisan breads, or non-durum pasta as a 100% grist or blended with high protein hard red spring wheat to reduce wheat cost and optimize the quality characteristics of the finished products. All U.S. wheat classes bring consistency in quality and consistency of supply to the market. Although each new crop year brings different challenges and opportunities, U.S. wheat is always available to the global market. Wheat is a raw material manufactured into a bakery ingredient, flour. The flour made from each unique class of U.S. wheat brings value to the market in the unique quality characteristics to make a variety of baked goods and noodles. Each region, country, and culture have wheat-based food products that are uniquely their own. With 6 distinct classes of wheat, the U.S. has the right wheat class to help deliver the optimal quality and value for every variety of product on the market. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marcia Boswell.
Thanks, Marcia, and we'll be back with more on Agriculture Today.
When a thunderstorm approaches, follow these safety tips. Lightning, known as the underrated killer, usually strikes the tallest objects, so avoid standing beneath trees or other isolated tall objects. Take shelter in a sturdy building. Remember, if you're close enough to hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck by lightning. Help keep you and your family safe this severe weather season. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
Tying off this Agriculture Today, it's our weekly overview of the Kansas agricultural weather scene. Joined once again online by Mary Knapp, climatologist with K-State Research and Extension. And Mary, lo and behold, more than a few Kansans woke up this morning to snow cover out there.
Yes, and some places had fairly significant, well, not significant, it wasn't in the foot range, but we had places that had over an inch of snow. A lot of places, the snow was melting as it was falling, and so we're left with a trace. There was rainfall before it switched to snow, and so we had some pretty nice rainfall numbers, mainly in the eastern areas, particularly the northeast and east central, where over an inch was reported in a number of locations.
And these places could stand moisture. In fact, it's been getting very gradually dry across a fair part of Kansas, has it not?
Yes, it has. In particular, we're looking at north central and the central divisions. The soils are drying up there fairly quickly. They did see some moisture, but they're still behind. We did not add them as abnormally dry to the drought monitor yet, given the fact that the air temperatures are still well below what they would be at this time of the year, and we're not seeing a whole lot of vegetative growth or active demand. So we're watching that area very, very closely. We did see some slight expansion in the southwest. They've missed out again. And in fact, if we look at our numbers for the week ending the 14th of April, statewide, we averaged only 0.9 of an inch for the week. In Manhattan, we would expect to get that in a single day. The western divisions, Southwest didn't average anything. I mean, they may have had a drop or two, but that was it. The central divisions also didn't average anything, and they normally would see about 1/2 to 6/10 of an inch in that week's time. So they're digging a deficit fairly quickly.
And accompanying that general dryness, colder than normal temperatures for this time of the year, and there are earnest concerns now about the impacts on the winter wheat crop.
Right. There will be an article in the Agronomy e-update coming out later this afternoon that goes over the state and where the greatest risks are. The coldest temperatures were in the northwest, but that area, the wheat development is not nearly so advanced. So there is some risk there, but not nearly so large as in the center part of the state, where the temperatures were not quite as cold, but the wheat is much more advanced and therefore more vulnerable. Producers might look at that and check and see where they fall in that risk pattern. And again, it'll take a number of days to actually see. There's likely to be some cosmetic damages that'll be visible fairly quickly, but the real question is what happened to that growing point. And we don't want to ignore the corn producers. There are a number that have gotten their corn in the ground, and Ignacio Ciampitti will have an article in the Agronomy e-update as well that looks at the potential risk to that corn crop.
And soil temperatures are pivotal here, but you say that those have not fluctuated a great deal even with these colder ambient temperatures.
Well, they have moved a little bit, but not nearly so dramatically as you might have expected with temperatures in the teens. We have seen more of a buffering impact from the moisture that is still in the ground. So we pretty much are averaging in the upper 40s to low 50s for the temperatures across the state. And given the fact that we have seen air temperatures, again, like I said, in the teens, it's kind of nice to have that buffering impact from the soils.
To the forecast then, and it would appear, Mary, that we will be able to put this colder weather behind us soon.
Right. It looks like we might warm up even as early as this weekend. Temperatures more seasonal. The 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks both favor warmer than normal temperatures for those periods, which carries us through the end of April. Question will be what is going to happen in the long range. They did release the May outlook yesterday, and that is neutral. It's equally likely to be warmer or colder than normal. Kind of watching to see whether or not there will be a final intrusion of that colder Arctic air later in the month. We were likely to start May on the warm side, but the question is how we're going to end it up. On the moisture side of things, we do have some chances for precipitation next week. Still looking at how that might develop. We've been not seeing as much as some of the models have indicated, so we're looking to see whether or not that southwest corner will finally get some action going. They really need it and need it fairly desperately. The 6 to 10 day outlook actually is favoring a fairly good chance for wetter than normal across the state. That chance lessens a little bit when we go to the 8 to 14, but still is favoring the wetter side. Again, we need a lot more rainfall as we end April to make it to normal than we did at the beginning of the month. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. The southeast would be just as happy to switch some of that moisture to the southwest. They are still well above what they need. I just checked our Mesonet station near Columbus, and from the 1st of March through the middle of April, they've had just a shade under 10 inches of rain.
Wow.
And that's, 45 days worth of moisture.
And fortunate for those needing moisture, maybe unfortunate for those in the southeast. The May outlook you mentioned is suggesting we may be in for a wet month coming up.
Right. It does favor that wetter than normal for the entire state. So we'll see how that plays out.
As always, the update is appreciated, Mary. Many thanks to you, and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, Eric, and we'll look forward to some sunshine for the weekend.
Indeed.
At least in eastern Kansas.
That's Mary Knapp, climatologist with K-State Research and Extension. That's our time for today and for the week. We appreciate you being along with us. Do enjoy your weekend. Eric Atkinson here for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.